That's the wrong formula. She didn't shout it. She didn't even raise her voice. She whispered it, soft, sharp, and so damn certain, that the words sliced through the air like a scalpel, landing inches from $1 billion signature. The rooftop of the Beacon was supposed to host a celebration. Charleston's most powerful CEO, Grayson Wells, was minutes away from signing the biggest clean energy deal in the Southeast. The city's skyline shimmered behind him, the champagne had already been poured, and the investors were smiling. Every camera was primed, every handshake rehearsed. And then a black waitress, a woman nobody had noticed all evening, whose name no one had bothered to ask, leaned in and derailed everything with 6 quiet syllables. That's the wrong formula. People think power moves come with noise. But sometimes, they come with silence, and a whisper that refuses to be ignored. Her name was Amara Davis. And in that single moment, she flipped the script on every assumption in the room. The woman they thought was invisible was about to become the most important voice in the building. This wasn't just a corporate drama. This was a black story about truth, injustice, stolen brilliance, and a kind of courage that makes billionaires freeze mid-signature. Amara wasn't supposed to be there, not as a mind, not as a threat, and certainly not as a scientist. But that's what made this story matter. That's what made her whisper hit harder than any lawsuit ever could. She could have stayed quiet. She could have let them crash and burn. But something inside her refused to let a lie win, even if it cost her everything. This is the story of the whisper that stopped $100 million cold, and the black woman who dared to speak it. If you're here for stories that challenge what we think we know, stick around. What happens next will shake more than just a rooftop. Before she became the whisper, Amara Davis was just another smile behind a tray. Guests saw grace in her steps, precision in her hands, warmth in her voice. What they didn't see was the mind behind the smile, a mind that once stood in front of chalkboards at MIT, solving equations most people couldn't pronounce. Years before that rooftop night, Amara had been one of the most promising young scientists in the country. Full ride to MIT. Double major in chemistry and applied physics. She could recite complex formulas like poetry, decode particle behavior before lunch, and still find time to tutor students struggling to keep up. She was young, brilliant, and black in a world that applauded diversity in brochures but punished it in boardrooms. Her work on energy-efficient catalytic reactions caught the attention of Dr. Evan Sinclair, a tenured professor with a sharp suit and a sharper agenda. He took her under his wing, praised her insights, and promised joint authorship on a revolutionary paper. The formula they built together, the one now sitting on that Beacon rooftop, was born from her sleepless nights, not his. But when the paper went public, her name was nowhere to be found. Sinclair claimed she was merely a research assistant, that her input was supportive, not substantial. The university took his side. The funding disappeared. The legal threats appeared. And just like that, the rising star disappeared into the shadows of someone else's glory. Amara tried to fight back. But every door she knocked on stayed shut. Every email unanswered. Every meeting cancelled before it began. She was advised, softly, firmly, to move on. Move on to what? Her resume was radioactive. Her confidence was shredded. Her identity stolen. She returned home to South Carolina, moved back in with her aunt, and picked up a job at the Beacon. It paid the bills and kept her invisible. She learned how to glide between tables, how to anticipate a guest's need before they asked, how to smile, even when they called her girl, or waved her off like background noise. But her mind never stopped calculating, never stopped remembering, never stopped watching. She buried the scientist. She wore the server uniform like armor. And for 5 years, she kept her head down, her mouth shut, and her brilliance under wraps. Until one night, when a familiar formula, flawed and stolen, reappeared under the candlelight. And the ghost behind the smile stepped forward to haunt the truth. Table 8 at the Beacon wasn't just a table. It was the mountaintop, reserved for those who didn't climb the ladder, but owned the building it leaned against. That night, seated under a golden chandelier and facing the Atlantic breeze, were 4 men whose combined net worth could fund the entire public school system of a small state. In the center, Grayson Wells, 52 years old, Southern-born, Stanford-educated, founder and CEO of Wells Ion Energy, the green tech unicorn that promised to revolutionize sustainable fuel. He had a reputation for being both brilliant and brutal. His white linen shirt sleeves were rolled up, Rolex exposed, as if he were ready to jump into the lab himself. But Grayson hadn't touched a beaker in 20 years. His genius had shifted from theory to deal-making. And tonight, he was ready to make the biggest one of his life. To his left sat Dr. Evan Sinclair, a man with the smooth confidence of someone who had never had to explain himself. Sinclair wore a tailored gray suit and a smirk that rarely left his face. He had parlayed Amara's research into a shiny new title, Chief Scientific Advisor. Tonight, he was the scientific star of the show. Across from him, with a calm but calculating air, was Elijah Brandt, a venture capitalist from Texas whose cowboy boots were worth more than most people's cars. He didn't speak often, but when he did, the room shifted. And next to him from Singapore sat Mr. Tan Wei Lim, an international clean tech investor known for betting early on winning horses. All eyes were on Grayson and Sinclair. The 2 men had been building this pitch for months. The formula, a supposedly groundbreaking catalyst for clean hydrogen production, was the heart of it. A revolution in a napkin sketch, designed to reduce global emissions and make Grayson even richer. They talked about numbers, market penetration, energy ratios. Words like legacy and monetization curve floated around like champagne bubbles. Wait staff hovered at a respectful distance. Cameras were off, but the tension buzzed like a live broadcast. None of them noticed the black waitress silently refilling their glasses. None of them cared to. She was just part of the service, a fixture of the evening, until she wasn't. In that moment, Amara wasn't a waitress. She was a witness. And what she saw at that table wasn't innovation. It was theft. It was betrayal dressed in silk ties and power suits. And they were about to sign her name away again, this time, in ink worth $100 million. Amara had worked at the Beacon long enough to recognize the difference between indifference and disdain. One was passive, the other was a performance. And tonight, the performance was in full swing. She moved around table 8 with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to be invisible on command. The trick wasn't in the steps, it was in the smile. A smile that disarmed, that softened discomfort, that said, "I am not a threat," even when she was being dismissed mid-sentence. She poured Grayson's wine. He didn't look at her. She offered Mr. Brandt a clean napkin. He nodded once, still scanning the numbers on his tablet. Mr. Lim gave a polite thank you, but quickly turned back to the conversation. Then came Dr. Sinclair. He looked right at her, and smiled. But not the kind of smile that said, "Thank you." This one was laced with something bitter, something smug. It was the kind of smile you give when you know something no one else does. When you see someone beneath you trying to stand tall, and all you want to do is remind them of where you believe they belong. "Careful there," he said lightly, as Amara cleared the appetizer plates. "Don't spill on the contracts, sweetheart. Could be the most expensive mess of the night." The others chuckled. Amara smiled back, tightly. Not because it was funny. Not because she was amused. But because anything less would be labeled as rude, attitude, difficult. Labels that stick longer when they're placed on black women. She'd heard them before. You don't smile enough. Too quiet to be friendly. Too sharp to just be a server. That last one had come from a woman wearing pearls and entitlement. Sinclair leaned back, swirling his wine. "Isn't it amazing," he said, turning toward Grayson, "how many of these places push diversity on the floor staff but somehow can't find any qualified talent for the lab?" It was delivered with a chuckle, but Amara caught the edge in his voice. Grayson smirked, not fully registering what had just been said, or choosing not to. Mr. Brandt raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Amara didn't flinch. She just kept moving, kept smiling. Because in rooms like these, racism didn't wear a hood. It wore a tailored suit and flashed its teeth in a joke. But behind her eyes, the fire was building. Because they weren't just laughing at a joke. They were laughing at her existence. That's the wrong formula. Amara didn't say it loud. She didn't need to. Just 6 words, spoken barely above the hum of the rooftop heaters, and the entire table shifted, without anyone realizing why. Grayson Wells had been reaching for his Mont Blanc pen, his hand hovering just above the signature line. The moment his fingers curled around it, her voice reached him, soft, almost imagined, but undeniable. He froze. For a split second, the world around him dulled. The chatter, the clinking glassware, the subtle jazz floating through the rooftop speakers, all of it faded. He turned, slowly, to the voice that had interrupted the moment he had spent a year preparing for. Amara stood just beside him, pouring sparkling water with perfect posture, her expression unreadable. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't trembling. She just stood there, composed, as if pointing out a wine pairing. Grayson blinked. "Excuse me." Amara leaned in slightly, her tone low, intimate, like a secret between them. "The last line of the formula. It's unstable. The coefficients for the heat curve are wrong. Under pressure, that catalyst won't just fail. It'll react." Across the table, Dr. Sinclair's head snapped up. "What did you say?" he asked, the edge in his voice sharp enough to slice through the cloth napkin in front of him. Amara didn't flinch. She placed the pitcher down with grace and looked directly at Grayson. "You're about to sign a deal based on a flawed equation. If you do, people could get hurt." Sinclair let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Are we seriously entertaining commentary from the waitstaff now? This is absurd." He looked around, expecting support. The investors exchanged unsure glances. Mr. Brandt broke the silence. "She seems pretty sure of herself." Sinclair scoffed. "She's a server, not a scientist." Grayson held up a hand, silencing them all. His eyes locked on Amara. There was something in her gaze. Not desperation. Not arrogance. Truth. He tapped the pen slowly against the contract, then turned fully toward her. "What's your name?" "Amara Davis," she said, steady and clear. He studied her a beat longer. Then he capped the pen and stood. "Everyone, hold tight," he said. "Miss Davis and I are going to have a quick conversation. In private." And just like that, the power shifted. The deal paused. And the woman they all tried to ignore just became the most important person in the room. The door clicked shut behind them, muffling the rooftop breeze and the murmurs of stunned investors. Inside, the private suite was quiet, dimly lit, and lined with dark wood panels. A single table stood in the center, with a digital whiteboard on one wall and a view of the Charleston skyline shimmering beyond the glass. Grayson Wells loosened his collar and turned to face her. "Start from the beginning," he said, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "And make it count." Amara took a breath, not a shaky one, but steady. She had waited years for this. Not the room. Not the man. The moment. A chance to be heard, uninterrupted. "I was part of the original research behind that formula," she began. "Back at MIT, I worked under Dr. Evan Sinclair when he was still pretending to be a teacher instead of a thief." Grayson didn't react. He just listened. "I developed a method for enhancing catalytic stability under extreme pressure," she continued. "But the final variable, the one Evan used in your pitch, was flawed. I discovered that error before we published. When I confronted him, he said I misunderstood my own work." She walked to the digital whiteboard and picked up the stylus like she had never stopped using one. The moment her hand hit the screen, something changed. Her posture shifted. She wasn't a server anymore. She was a scientist. Quick, confident strokes drew the equation, line by line, until the final term stood out in bold. "This value," she circled it. "It ignores heat variance at molecular thresholds. In real-world tests, it triggers an exponential reaction, one you can't control once it starts. Think malfunction, maybe explosion. Grayson moved closer, studying the board. How sure are you? 100%, she said. This isn't ego. It's math. I tried to report it. Sinclair buried my name, published the flawed version, and moved on. I lost everything. And now you're a waitress? He asked, not with judgment, but disbelief. Amara met his gaze. I was a waitress. Tonight, I'm something else. Grayson paced once, then stopped. If what you're saying is true, he said, he didn't just lie to me. He put my company, and lives, at risk. She nodded. He looked at her, not like a billionaire scanning a resume, but like a man seeing something he hadn't expected. All right, he said quietly. Let's see if the data backs you up. They took the elevator down 12 floors to the private R&D suite tucked inside the Wells Ion Energy Tower. The hallway was quiet, lined with frosted glass and soft white lights humming above. This wasn't a place meant for tours. It was where secrets lived and breakthroughs were born. Grayson swiped his badge at a secure door and led Amara into a climate-controlled server room. Cold air met her skin like a reset. Rows of humming processors lined the walls, their lights blinking like tiny truths waiting to be revealed. At the far end, a sleek console awaited. This is where Sinclair's team ran their simulations, Grayson explained. You'll have full access. He tapped a few keys and handed her control. Amara's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. It had been years since she touched anything more advanced than a point-of-sale system or a credit card reader. But the code came back to her like breathing. The moment she pulled up the simulation logs, her eyes narrowed. Let's start with the test batch from last month, she said. Within seconds, data flooded the screen. Charts, numbers, thermal curves, stability indexes. She moved quickly, parsing through lines of information most people couldn't pronounce. And then she stopped. There, she pointed. Grayson leaned in. What am I looking at? This spike. It happens exactly 4.6 seconds into the pressure test. The program flags it as a sensor error. But it's not an error. It's a reaction. She pulled up the raw logs underneath. The moment of instability wasn't isolated, it repeated across multiple tests. Each time, it had been flagged, scrubbed, and replaced with stable outputs. Amara shook her head. He didn't just overlook this. He buried it. The code has a suppression script, auto-correcting the instability and generating fake results. Grayson's jaw tightened. Can you prove he wrote it? Amara dug deeper. Every piece of code leaves a fingerprint, a timestamp, a login ID, a digital signature. And then she found it. Sinclair. Logged in. Executed the suppression sequence. 5 times over 2 weeks. She looked up at him. He knew. Grayson stared at the screen, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. He was going to sell me a lie, and build a facility on top of it. Amara nodded once. The math doesn't lie. But men like Sinclair do. The screen flickered. Just as Amara was about to export the files onto a secure drive, a new window opened, a system warning. Unauthorized access detected. External IP flagged. The air in the room changed. The hum of the servers no longer sounded like background noise. It sounded like breathing. Someone else was in the system. Grayson stepped closer. That's not normal, he said. No, Amara replied, her fingers already moving. Someone is watching us. Live. She traced the intrusion. Whoever it was, they weren't sloppy. They came in through a masked VPN, layered in encryption, trying to ghost through the network. But they made a mistake. One misstep in the command stack, one line of code out of sync, and she saw it. Sinclair's ID. He's accessing the servers right now, she said. And he's targeting the raw data directory. Grayson's voice dropped. He's trying to wipe it. Amara nodded. He knows we found the truth. He's trying to bury it, again. She typed fast, initiating a local backup to the console's secure cache. But the progress bar crawled. The files were massive, and Sinclair was working to cut them off before she could lock them in. "He's good," she whispered. "But not good enough." Grayson pulled out his phone and called building security. "Cut Dr. Sinclair's access," he ordered. "Right now. Full lockdown on Lab Suite 3. No remote commands, no terminals, no mobile sync." "Yes, sir," came the reply. Amara launched a trace. What she found stopped her cold. "He's not remote," she said slowly. "That's not an outside IP. That's internal." Grayson turned to her. "Do you mean?" "He's inside the building." They looked at each other. The system flashed again. A new threat alert. Manual override attempt from Console B. And then another one. Proximity sensor triggered on level 9. Mainframe corridor. Amara's stomach sank. "He's coming here." She yanked the USB from the console and tucked it into her pocket. The lights overhead dimmed for a second, flickering like a warning from the building itself. "Backup's incomplete," she said. "But I've got enough. The rest is still on this server. If he reaches it." Grayson's jaw clenched. "He won't." A loud buzz rang from the security panel by the door. And just like that, the server room stopped being a lab and became a battlefield. The buzz from the security panel turned into a harsh, repeating alarm. Red lights blinked along the edge of the ceiling. The lab's automated voice came on, calm but firm. "Security breach detected. Lockdown initiated." The door behind them hissed and sealed with a solid metallic thud. Grayson rushed to the panel. "Override it," he barked, swiping his card. The panel flashed red. "Access denied." Amara stared at the door, heart pounding. Sinclair must have triggered a lockdown sequence. He knew we'd trap him. So he locked us in instead. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the dull hum of the servers. They weren't alone. A second door, used mostly for maintenance, rattled slightly. A keypad flickered beside it. Whoever was out there was trying to brute force his way inside. "He's coming," Amara whispered. "Not to debate. Not to talk." Grayson looked around. "We need to protect that data." Amara pulled the USB from her pocket. "He can't get this. The rest of it is on the main drive. If he wipes it, we lose everything." Her eyes darted to the far end of the room. "There's a service hatch behind that rack. Leads into the maintenance tunnels. I've seen it on the schematics." Grayson hesitated. "You're not serious." "I am," she said. "It's tight, dark, probably full of dust. But it's a way out. And it's not locked." She ran to the rack, dragging it just enough to reveal a small, square metal panel secured with latches. No screws. No key code. Just force. Grayson grabbed the edge and pulled. It gave way with a groan. Suddenly, the outer door slammed once, hard. Grayson looked back. "You go," he said. "Get out, get the data somewhere safe." "I'm not leaving you," she said. But then the maintenance keypad lit up green. A code had worked. "No time," she hissed. She climbed into the narrow shaft, twisted her body through the opening, then turned back. "You lock that door behind me." Grayson gave her a nod, his eyes fierce. She pulled the panel closed just as the lab door slid open and footsteps entered the room. Amara began to crawl. The metal walls were cold. The air smelled like machine oil and dust. But her hands were steady, and the USB drive in her pocket felt like fire. Somewhere behind her, danger stalked. But she had the truth, and she wasn't letting it go. The emergency boardroom was quiet, eerily quiet. No rooftop ambience. No swirling wine. Just cold air, a long table, and a storm brewing behind every pair of eyes. Amara stood at one end, still in her black server uniform, dust streaking her sleeves, hair pulled back, face calm but burning with resolve. Beside her, Grayson Wells, now fully awake to the deception that had nearly wrecked his company. Across from them sat the board members, Mr. Brandt and Mr. Lim among them, jaws tight, brows low. No smiles. No small talk. At the far end, escorted by security, was Dr. Evan Sinclair. His tie was gone. His collar loosened. But the arrogance, still there, cracking around the edges, but clinging like a stain. "Let the record show," Grayson began, his voice sharp as glass, "that this emergency meeting was called to address serious allegations of scientific fraud and internal sabotage." Sinclair scoffed. "You're letting a waitress derail a billion-dollar project?" Amara stepped forward, her voice even. "No. He's letting the truth derail a billion-dollar lie." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the USB. With a soft click, she inserted it into the console. The wall screen lit up. "Simulation logs," she said. "Unedited. Original test results. And the suppression code embedded in the system. Each data point overwritten. Each instability flagged as sensor error. All written by one man." Grayson tapped a key. A code signature appeared. Sinclair_E_login_04:12 AM. 5 times, Grayson said. 5 separate occasions. "You didn't make a mistake, Evan. You made a plan," Amara continued. "And here's the email. From your private account to a shell company linked to overseas competitors. The subject line, full formula, clean version. You were ready to sell them my corrected work. The one you stole from me 6 years ago." Mr. Lim leaned forward. "Is this true?" Sinclair looked around. His mouth opened, but no words came. Just the sound of his own breath and the realization that the room had turned against him. Grayson nodded to security. "You're done here." The guards stepped in. Sinclair's last act of defiance was a bitter glare toward Amara. She didn't flinch. "Let this be a reminder," she said softly. "Just because someone's quiet doesn't mean they're not watching. Or remembering." Sinclair was led out in silence. This time, his name wouldn't go on the formula. Hers would. The boardroom was still. After Sinclair was escorted out, no one moved for a long moment. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged. Like the room itself understood that something far bigger than a deal had just taken place. Amara stood tall at the head of the table, her uniform wrinkled, her hands dusted with graphite from the maintenance shaft. But to the men and women staring back at her, she didn't look out of place. She looked exactly where she belonged. Grayson cleared his throat, stepped forward, and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "This," he said, "is a new agreement. A new project. One built on truth, not theft." The heading read, Davis Wells Innovations. Amara's breath caught. "We're creating a new division," he continued, "and it's going to operate independently of every lab Sinclair touched. You'll be the CTO. You'll hire your own team, set your own direction, and you'll hold 30% equity." He paused, letting the number land. "Full creative control. Full credit." Mr. Brandt leaned forward. "That formula of yours, it's not just viable. It's scalable. And it's more efficient than what Sinclair pitched." Mr. Lim nodded. "You'll have international backing. You'll have freedom. But most of all, you'll have respect." Amara stared at the document. It wasn't just a contract. It was a restoration. A resurrection of every hour, every night she had spent believing the world would never hear her name again. She looked at Grayson. "Why me?" He gave a small smile. "Because you saw something everyone else missed. Because when you could have stayed silent, you spoke up. And because you earned it, not tonight, but 6 years ago, when they tried to erase you and you kept going anyway." Her throat tightened. Not from nerves. From something deeper. She reached for the pen. This time, the ink would be hers. This time, the name written at the top wasn't borrowed or stolen. It was hers. Amara Davis. Scientist. Leader. And no longer invisible. 6 months later, the lab at Davis Wells Innovations didn't look like most corporate tech spaces. There were no gray walls or buzzword posters. No glass trophies gathering dust on shelves. Instead, sunlight poured through tall windows, and laughter echoed between stations where engineers, researchers, and interns worked side by side. At the center of it all was Amara Davis. She wore a crisp lab coat now, her name embroidered just above her heart. But beneath it, she hadn't changed. She still listened more than she spoke. Still noticed the quiet ones in the room. Still carried the memory of who she used to be, not to hide it, but to honor it. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed napkin. The new formula, her formula, scribbled in black ink with a subscript, AD 24. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. It was hers. She walked past rows of workstations and paused at a group of interns. 3 young women, one of them black, her eyes locked on a string of code. The same intensity Amara used to carry. The same hunger to be seen. Take your time, Amara told her gently. Your solution is in there. Just don't let the noise around you tell you otherwise. The girl nodded, a slow smile forming. Before the day ended, Amara sat in her office and looked out across Charleston's skyline. Once, she thought it was a world built without her. Now, she saw something else. She saw possibility. Because here's the truth. You don't have to be in the spotlight to be powerful. You don't need a title to make history. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one voice, one whisper of truth spoken in the face of silence. And to anyone watching this, to the person who feels overlooked, underpaid, underestimated, this story is for you. You are not invisible. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about your own voice in a world that too often ignores it, go ahead and like this video. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that their brilliance matters. And if you want more stories like this, real stories, black stories, human stories, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because we're just getting started.